One. Maren?
Got it. Thank you for joining us. Madam Chairwoman, Maren Dubois for the record. I will call out the names of those I have confirmed to be on the line. If you do not hear your name, please let us know at the end. Of course, we have Mayor March.
Here.
Shane Ammerman.
Here.
Nicole Bungham.
Here.
Mike Casey.
Here.
Robert Fielden.
Here.
Ellen Goldberg.
Here.
Brian Knutson.
Here.
Zane Marshall.
Here.
MJ Maynard.
Here.
Andrew Rother.
Here.
Chad Williams.
Here.
And Jonas Peterson.
Here.
Also, please note that we have several RTC staff on the line for today's meeting. This includes Mr. Andrew Kelman, Acting Director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Ms. Ray Lathrop, Manager of Regional Planning, Ms. Michelle Laramie, Senior Regional Planner, and Mr. Paul Goley, Management Analyst. I also want to provide a few reminders. One, state your name for the record before speaking. Voting will be done verbally as a group, calling for ayes and nays. If there are no nays or abstentions, then the motion will carry. If there are nays, then a roll call vote will be required. The chairwoman will call for any comments or questions after an item has been presented. And that's all I have. Thank you for your participation in today's meeting. I will turn it back to you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you very much, Maren. We can move on to the next item, Ray.
Yep, good to go.
Great. I'm going to take myself off mute. Thank you, Chair March. This is Ray Lathrop, Manager of Regional Planning for the RTC. The first item on our agenda is to conduct your first citizens participation period. As you know, on March 22nd, 2020, the State of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspended the requirement to have a physical location for public meetings. Pursuant to Directive 006 and for the health and safety of our community, this meeting is being held virtually. To allow for public participation, the RTC is accepting public comments via email at publiccomments@rtcsnv.com. Comments can be submitted to be read aloud or to be added directly to the written record. Ms. Maren Dubois, Management Analyst for the RTC, will read the public comments received by the RTC. Madam Chairwoman,
Thank you, Ray. This is the first time set aside for public comment. This time is limited to comments on items included on the agenda. Comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Maren Dubois again for the record. We do not have any public comments at this time.
Thank you. Then this concludes the public comment period. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from October 29th, 2020 Steering Committee meeting. Are there any comments or questions from the committee regarding those minutes? If not, can I have a motion to accept?
This is Zane Marshall. I'll make a motion to accept.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. And that motion carries. Ray, moving on to item 3.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Ray Lathrop again for the record. The next item on the agenda is to receive a presentation of the regional housing forecast led by regional planning staff. I'll quickly present a few slides regarding our research on future housing. We presented in the past, and since last year, we've identified several studies within the MPO work program that we believe will help our partners implement the regional plan. Increasingly, the stock, availability, and affordability of housing is a goal of the regional plan, and so we've included this topic in our work program. Next slide. So as a reminder, we've compiled a technical working group of planners, community development representatives, and those working in social services that have we've maintained contact with this group since our first meeting in September. We've shared with them some additional resources and potential tools that we found in order to provide updates into the direction of our report. There we go. Next slide. For the future housing inventory and needs, we're looking at several data sources to get a better picture of how to frame this question. We've looked at historic and forecast data, including population and employment, local zoning and land use plans, and affordability and production in order to estimate or identify future housing surpluses or shortfalls. In addition to this data, we've collected a lot of research that defines the methodology to estimate future housing needs. Next slide. Recently, we met with a lot of the local planners that make up the land use working group. This work group regionally collects housing data to inform the transportation demand model on an annual basis. They're also the ones that inform some of the CBER population projections annually. We've gathered from the individual jurisdictions information on their residential land use types, the future acreage of each type, and the maximums, as well as the average density that can be built on each type. We're hoping to use this information to see how our region plans for housing and to a certain extent what the region may look like in 2050. Of course, this information is only a possibility of what could be built, and there are many reasons why these numbers may not show up as the precise future, but it does give us a glimpse as to what could happen. This has also led us to looking for some best practices on how other regions may plan housing and how they deal with some of the uncertainties that exist with these types of projections and forecasts. So we're reaching out to some peer communities right now to understand other processes and hope to include some of those suggestions in our final report. Next slide. We've also found an open source model that projects future housing needs based on today's demographics and existing conditions. The Envision Tomorrow model was used during the original Southern Nevada Strong planning phase. So some of the outputs, like the graphs and charts, are similar to those that are found in the Southern Nevada Strong Housing Market Analysis published in 2015. At this point, we have some initial findings that we plan on sharing with our TAG members soon to get their feedback and ideas. We're hoping to be able to compare projections from the model with the details that we've gathered from the planning departments. Although we do know that there are limitations to this type of analysis, our report may include some next steps as far as what additional research will be relevant to future housing if we plan on continuing housing into our next work program. So I know it's a really quick update with not a lot of details. This study is very much still in progress and something we're working on weekly. And at this point, I'm happy to take any questions as we proceed, or I'm happy to share with you any of the intermediary findings or include anyone here on this group in our next TAG meeting, which we hope to hold in the next month.
Are there any questions or comments or interest in updates from Ray on the next steps?
Hi,
Yes,
this is
Bob.
Bob Fielden, and mine is a question of interest. Historically, this valley has all been single-family residential, along with some supporting multifamily residential. And I'm wondering in the future if we're looking at any transformation so that we become higher urban density with housing than we presently have, and that if there are any trends to indicate market support for that. I think the city of Las Vegas has probably been the most progressive in trying to push redevelopment to include housing downtown, and they really haven't been that successful in bringing upon housing that is affordable or can be occupied by people who live and work downtown. And I'm just wondering, what is the shape of that, or from what you have uncovered to date in terms of how this is going to transform, or if we will always remain a market, if we'll always remain principally single family and designated residential suburban rather than integrated urban housing. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and one that we're still kind of in the middle of trying to determine. But you're absolutely correct. The master plans or long-range plans within most of the jurisdictions, Henderson, Las Vegas, and Clark County is updating theirs as well, does envision more dense and maybe redevelopment areas to increase the density. And so we have seen that either new land use types in the future or more prioritization of that type of development. I think the demand is a question that we're trying to answer. We've seen some kind of preference studies to look at how that demand may grow in the future. But overall, we're definitely trying to dig into what the region as a whole would look like in the future and how the diversity of housing types would be a part of that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? One of the things I'd like to share is back in about 2007, 2008, there was some work done at the university by CBER and by the LEAD Institute that looked at jobs housing balance and what the affordability was for housing. And that obviously has a lot of impact on urban densities and the addition of urban densities like in the downtowns of Las Vegas, Henderson, North Las Vegas. And so maybe as we're doing this regional housing inventory and forecasting, we should also be forecasting current wages and what future wages are proposed to be based upon the kind of growth that we'd be looking at, bringing in new industries. I know companies like Haas Automation that are looking at paying $60,000 a year or better for 2,500 jobs means that those folks can afford a different product type if they choose. But those that maybe need more urban density or to live along transit corridors may have different needs as well. So that may influence and color some decisions that get made. So maybe as we're looking at the housing inventory, we should also be looking at what projected wages will be as well.
Yeah, definitely a part of the analysis that we're trying to include, definitely.
Any other questions or comments from committee members? So maybe you could plan to provide us with updates along the way, Ray?
Yep.
That would be valuable. Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, we'll move on to the next item.
All right, thank you. The next item on today's agenda is to receive a presentation on the extreme heat and vulnerability research led by the regional planning staff. Mr. Paul Gulley from the team will be providing the update.
Thank you, Paul.
Great, thank you, Paul Gulley for the record. So we've continued to make progress on this extreme heat vulnerability study since the last steering committee meeting, and we're excited to share a few more updates with you all today. Next slide. So just as a reminder, with this study, we are looking to first identify local demographic and environmental factors that increase vulnerability to extreme heat, and then use that data or analyze it to kind of pinpoint areas or predict where populations most vulnerable to extreme heat are in our valley. And then finally, identify targeted responses and interventions that could help save lives during extreme heat events, especially in these most vulnerable areas. And at this point, we are pretty close to finalizing the data and spatial analysis components of the study, which really make up the bulk of those first two items. And as you'll recall, our analysis is built around the fact that there are really three dimensions or three components of extreme heat vulnerability. So level of exposure, capacity to adapt during extreme heat events, and then sensitivity to exposure. And as I mentioned in previous meetings, we've conducted extensive research to come up with a set of locally specific indicators for each of these components. And in the time since you last received an update, we did make one final tweak to this set of indicators. thanks to some help from some planners at the City of Henderson, we were actually able to track down some parcel level residential air conditioning data for the region that we were able to incorporate. And after we made that change, we were able to then rerun our analysis. But I guess with one somewhat significant change, when we first ran the analysis, all of the indicators were weighted evenly. This time around, we utilized a prediction model to incorporate some weighting. So indicators within each component, within each of the three dimensions, were weighted based on their really their ability to predict heat-related health outcomes. Next slide. And so this is what the updated results of the spatial analysis look like. So again, on the far right is the extreme heat vulnerability composite map, and it's a composite of the three preceding maps on the screen. And at the last meeting, we just had PDFs or static images to share with you, but we've taken all of this updated analysis and now have it accessible via an interactive web map. And I think as of this morning, we're finished with the first version of it. So I took a few screenshots to give you a bit of an idea of its functionality. Again, still static images, but I assure you the map itself is fully interactive, and you can do a lot with it. So this is, you're looking at the default view. This is what you land on when you first get into the map. It's kind of zoomed out to a view of the urbanized area in our region. And you kind of get a sense of general areas that are more vulnerable or at risk. On the left is the layer list. There are 4 different layers that you can view. It's currently displaying the extreme heat vulnerability composite layer, but you can also click on the 3 components to view those individually as well. And so like I mentioned, here we're kind of zoomed out to more of a regional perspective, but you can also zoom in to the neighborhood level. Next slide. And the resolution on this is actually high enough that if you wanted to, you could zoom in, 6 or 7 or 8 times more and get down to like the individual cell level, or even like an individual house or building, if you wanted to. And you can click on any cell for a pop-up to get a look at the 3 component scores as well as the composite score for the cell. And we think there's some real benefit or real utility to this. It'll allow users to see which component or components are really driving a high score. So for example, with this cell, its exposure and adaptive capacity scores are pretty high, but its sensitivity score is relatively low. So when thinking through potential interventions or ways to mitigate the impacts of extreme heat in this general area, you might want to focus on responses that address exposure. So things like more trees or more green space, or cool rooftops or cool pavements that reflect solar radiation rather than absorb it. In addition to maybe looking at solutions or interventions related to adaptive capacity. So maybe adding a cooling station close by, or targeting some financial assistance to cover energy expenses or weatherization expenses, or making sure that bus stops have shade elements incorporated in this area. And so we're definitely excited to get this into the hands of our partners. We think it has the potential to help inform kind of both regional and neighborhood level mitigation efforts and planning in the future. So at this point, we'll be sending it out to the members of our technical advisory group to have them play around with it for a little bit and give us some feedback over the next month before we make it widely available. And so now that we have updated results, we're going to start putting together some neighborhood profiles for some of the higher scoring, most vulnerable areas in our region. We've met with most of the jurisdictions in the Valley to get their thoughts on areas that they'd be interested in getting a little more information on. And we've identified areas within the cities of Las Vegas, Henderson, North Las Vegas, and then the incorporated county to examine a little bit more closely. And we're planning on these to be pretty concise, so a page or two at most, and we'll be incorporating them into our final report. And for each profile, we just plan on including things like a demographic snapshot to give you an idea of who's living there, a few maps and pictures of the area to try and capture its general character and the character of the built environment, and then provide an overview of the area within the context of those 3 dimensions of extreme heat vulnerability. Again, to provide users or readers of our report with some specific context that may help develop or implement responses to address specific concerns in these areas. And as far as next steps go, again, we are going to be finalizing the interactive web map as we get feedback from our tag members. We'll be working to complete the neighborhood profiles and then begin drafting a final draft report. And our plan is to hold our 3rd technical advisory group meeting within the next month to share updates and prepare for some next steps. And we, as part of that meeting, we do want to discuss whether or not we should explore kind of a second phase of this project. We've gotten some pretty positive response from partners we've shared this with thus far. And there seems to be some consensus that this data can help inform current and future plans and research. UNLV, in fact, is using our preliminary findings in a service learning grant application that it submitted that's centered around tree planting in areas of need. We're also collaborating with the Gwynn Center as they kind of kick off their research project that's focused on heat and climate related emergency preparedness and policy analysis. So we're definitely hopeful that we can continue to build on this initial research and the initial scope of the study. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Committee members, do any of you have questions for Paul? I have a few comments. I'd just like to say that I love the mapping. I think it's a wonderful tool. I wonder, is there a tree inventory from each of the municipalities? I know Henderson keeps an inventory of our trees. I don't know if that's something that happens across Southern Nevada, but certainly that should be information that should be fed into this model as well. And I also wondered about integrating it into the county mapping. The county has a lot of extensive mapping, and having something like this that would be available as an overall layer to that mapping would be very useful and very effective. And certainly looking at sustainability and climate issues, having tree covers are pretty critical.
Yeah, we actually did some research into this kind of at the onset of this project, and so Henderson, Las Vegas, and I believe Clark County all do have an inventory of trees planted, I think, on public land, so property that is owned by the city or the county. We were unable to get kind of an extensive region-wide data set with tree information. There's some avenues that we explored that that might get us that. So in lieu of that, this time around, we a satellite imagery and the vegetation index. So it's not necessarily just including trees; it includes shrubs and grass as well. But as part of the NPO's UPWP, we did kind of scope out a project focused on updating the regional tree canopy.
That's great.
If you want to provide a little bit of an update or background on that.
Yeah. Are there other questions or comments from our committee members? Well, maybe we could also bring this back as an item for update as we move along and maybe discuss the next phase that you might be looking at as well. Thank you. And with that, if there's no more questions, we'll move on to the next item, Ray.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The next item on the agenda is to receive a presentation on the ongoing Opportunity Site Strategy 5-year progress report. Ms. Michelle Laramie, Senior Regional Planner for the RTC, will be presenting on this item.
Michelle?
Yes, thank you. So again, Michelle Laramie for the record. And as you know, as you probably remember, we've been working to assess progress on each of the 4 Southern Nevada Strong Opportunity sites. So we just wanted to provide you with a quick update on our work with this project. So since our last meeting, we have finished our report for the downtown North Las Vegas Opportunity Site, and we've been working with the City of Henderson and the City of Las Vegas to move forward with progress assessments on both the Boulder Highway and the Las Vegas Medical District sites. And for the Maryland Parkway site, we are waiting until the Maryland Parkway Transit-Oriented Study, which is a collaborative study underway with RTC, Las Vegas, and Clark County right now. We're waiting until that is closer to being complete until beginning our progress evaluation of the Maryland Parkway site. So if you recall, we did give a presentation covering our work with North Las Vegas at our last meeting. And the presentation was pretty detailed. It did go through each of these 4 components of the report. However, we did not share the final report itself as we were still working through some final revisions with North Las Vegas. So we've now completed those edits, and we did include the final report in your backup material. So I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that it is there for your review. But between our last presentation and sharing this final report with you today, there really haven't been any changes to the overall content. So I'm not gonna reshare all of the details of that report. The final report also is now available on the Southern Nevada Strong website, alongside the original implementation strategies that were adopted in 2015 as well. So you can see both of those reports there. And the link to that is provided on the bottom of this slide for you. And I'd just like to quickly call to your attention, you'll probably remember that there were 4 primary sections of the report, the 4 sections shown here on the slide. And this format is very similar for our current efforts with the City of Henderson and the City of Las Vegas. So it's going to remain pretty familiar to you as we go through our work on those upcoming sites today. We've also covered a lot of the process that we're going through for this project in the past. So again, I won't go into a lot of this detail, but I did just want to highlight quickly where we're at in the process right now with our work on Boulder Highway and the Medical District. So to date, we've completed the initial research and data gathering phase, and we have provided an early draft of this research to our 2 partners to begin reviewing. And these drafts, they included an overview of the history and vision for each opportunity site, as well as an initial progress assessment of where the implementation strategies are at today. So I'll quickly share just a few details with you on our findings for each of the opportunity sites, starting with Boulder Highway. So if you remember the Boulder Highway opportunity site, it's located at the Boulder Highway at the Gibson Broadbent intersection. And this site was chosen by the City of Henderson really for its potential to become a thriving transit-oriented neighborhood center. Community input during the initial Southern Nevada Strong planning process when the implementation strategies were developed really contributed to developing the vision for this site. And that community input focused on providing neighborhood-serving destinations and amenities, improving pedestrian facilities, and increasing housing options in the overall area. And also looking at the site and development on the site as a way to begin to contribute to a neighborhood identity that would include developing the area as a gateway into the city of Henderson. So there were 4 high-level actions which were created in order to encourage development that would contribute to that vision. And those 4 actions, which are kind of known as the implementation strategies, they are listed here, and each of these actions do contain multiple strategies that could be pursued in order to achieve these high-level goals. So our assessment looked at all of the strategies, and during our assessment, we found that almost half of these strategies, about 47%, are either complete or on track, which really do tell the story of Henderson being very committed to achieving the opportunity site vision for the opportunity site and for redeveloping Boulder Highway. And much of the progress that is currently kind of in motion right now is focused on the strategies that are related to demonstrating a public commitment to the site and improving transportation safety and connectivity for all transit modes, although there has been some movement on all 4 of these actions. So specifically, Henderson has completed many plans and policies that support the desired development types for the opportunity site. In the 5 years since the implementation strategies were adopted, Henderson has worked hard to align their planning documents with the goals and values of the Southern Nevada Strong Regional Plan, most notably adopting Henderson Strong in 2017, and also the recent adoption of the East Henderson Investment Strategy and the current work being done by the city to update their development code really further strengthens this alignment in the city of Henderson. Henderson is also already working to transform Boulder Highway into a multimodal thoroughfare, which will be complete with center running transit, through traffic lanes on either side of the roadway, and improved cyclist and pedestrian infrastructure. And that is being planned along the entire length of Henderson's portion of Boulder Highway, which will benefit the opportunity site. And of course, the site is not without its challenges. Generally, we have seen many of these challenges shared region-wide, specifically that development types, they have been slow to evolve beyond the traditional auto-oriented types that are prevalent in Southern Nevada. And we just really haven't seen infill and high-density development like mixed-use and transit-oriented development. They haven't evolved into the preferred development type here in the region yet. But we have seen some movement in some places around the valley. There's kind of some early examples of success, such as some of the new development we see in downtown Las Vegas, or some of the new mixed-use development near UNLV at the Maryland Parkway campus. And we also have a lot of new studies that have either recently been completed or are currently underway, like our livable center studies, and again, the Maryland Parkway TOD study. And these are also helping to bring new strategies to our region for incentivizing denser and mixed-use development. And we also know that aligning policies that encourage changes in the private sector, they do take time and patience, and they do require significant groundwork, which we see Henderson working through. Moving on to the Las Vegas Medical District. So the vision for this area is to support the emergence of an urban academic medical district that is supportive of top educational and medical opportunities, as well as amenities that increase overall access to wellness, healthcare, and active lifestyles. So strategies for achieving this vision, they actually included both primary actions as well as secondary actions. So there's a few more to look at here. And again, each action has multiple strategies that were reviewed as part of our progress assessment. So here we see the primary actions. They're focused on clarifying the goals and intent for public investment in the district, providing for coordination among various stakeholders in the district, and also providing district placemaking and parking strategies. And the secondary actions for the Las Vegas Medical District, they support these the primary goals, and they focus on increasing active transportation choices and open space in the district, and also encouraging supportive development like housing and retail in and around the district. In the Las Vegas Medical District, we did find that an overwhelming majority of the strategies, 90% of both the primary and secondary strategies, are either complete or on track. So needless to say, much progress has been made in implementing these actions in the medical district. So there have been kind of many quote milestones, if you will, reached in regards to the medical district's implementation strategies. Most notably, probably is the opening of UNLV School of Medicine and the recent groundbreaking on the medical education building, both of which really help to solidify the school's long-term presence and commitment to the district. And also, like Henderson, the city of Las Vegas has been working hard to align their plans and development policies to be supportive of redevelopment and the desired development types that they'd like to see in the district. And this effort included the adoption of a form-based code in the medical district, which is a completely new zoning and development code for the region. We also see a lot of similar challenges. Like I said, many of our challenges are shared region-wide. And there are still some challenges for encouraging redevelopment in the Las Vegas Medical District. Again, there hasn't been as much construction or evolution of building types as has been desired. The form-based code is really new, and so again, it does take time and patience to see how that may start to change development trends, particularly in the Las Vegas Medical District. There is still limited parking, and the prevalence of large surface parking lots does remain a challenge in the medical district. And while COVID has been challenging for various reasons for all of us, it has impacted planning in the medical district in some unique ways. Understandably, healthcare stakeholders in the district, they have had to redeploy their resources like many of us have elsewhere due to the current public health crisis. And it's not totally clear yet how this current crisis may also change healthcare in the future. For example, facility needs may change as telehealth has emerged as a possible solution for addressing access and more equitable access to healthcare. So because of some of these unknowns, strategic planning in the district is kind of somewhat of a holding pattern. And so while stakeholders work to overcome not only the current public health crisis, but also to kind of look forward towards what's next, some of that planning and coordination is kind of paused at the moment. So speaking of what's next, I did mention to you that we've shared our first drafts of our progress assessment with each jurisdiction, with the city of Henderson and the city of Las Vegas and our planning partners there. And we're now coordinating comments and revisions on these early drafts. And we've also had some initial conversations around possible opportunities for technical assistance. And we'll be coordinating some more conversations around that in the near future. And we hope to narrow down some specific deliverables for that in the coming weeks that we can share with you at our next meeting. So that really kind of concludes my overall presentation. I am happy to take any questions on either the opportunity sites or also any questions or comments you might have on that North Las Vegas, the downtown North Las Vegas report that is in your backup material.
Thank you, Michelle. And committee members, are there any questions of Michelle with regards to the plans and the updates that she provided us?
This is Ellen Goldsberg for the record for the City of North Las Vegas. I just wanted to thank the team for their incredible work, and we really enjoyed partnering with the organization for this. So thank you.
Thank you.
This is Andrew Rother from the City of Henderson. I want to mirror that. Thank you very much to both Ray and Michelle for coming and meeting with us and working through our comments. And we look forward to continue working with you. And this is an important project, and we're happy to be a part of it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I did have one question. I'm kind of excited and interested in watching the form-based codes evolve in the city of Las Vegas, especially in the medical district, just to see if you see some different product types and some different things happening. I see that Marco's online. Marco, I wonder if you might address the direction of the form-based code.
Yes, it's Mayor March. For the record, Marco Vlada, City of Las Vegas Planning Department. We have adopted form-based code zoning districts for the medical district as a pilot for the districts as a part of downtown. So far, we've adopted also for Fremont East and just this last month, the historic West Side. Eventually have the other districts completed, the civic and business, and as a part of the Maryland Parkway TOD project. That will be the eventual implementation. But overall, what that has translated to are new projects that will bring things up to the street and make Shadow Lane, Alta Drive, Charleston Boulevard more walkable and more accessible. Hopefully that also brings in some new housing types as well that are compatible for students and for people that want to not only near where they work, but for people who are, supportive of the other businesses that are immediately within the district. And I'll conclude with this eventually be in other parts of the city as well. And similar in style, but maybe not the same type of zoning, but 2050 master plan, we're going to be looking at corridors like Charleston Boulevard. It's east and west away from the medical district to really intensify specific intersections and nodes with higher density building, more mixed use housing and commercial types to activate individual sites along the corridor itself. So with that, if there's any questions.
Just one. I was wondering what kind of reception you were receiving from the development community.
Yeah, we have received a number of applications, and there has been continuing on to different parts of downtown. We have had a lot of questions as to how to work around some of the dimensional requirements and how to make it work. So it's still an iterative process that will continue to refine because it is so new.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll be watching. Are there any other questions or comments of Michelle?
Mayor March, this is Andrew from the City of Henderson. I want to jump in and just say that we're working with the same consultant that the City of Las Vegas worked with on their form-based code for our overall code update, and we are looking at using some form-based language along the Boulder Highway corridor, which would include this opportunity site. And so while we're not looking to adopt the form-based code for the citywide, we are taking some components of that for Boulder Highway and looking to do some right sizing of development. Right now, our zoning categories along Boulder Highway is the same from the top to the bottom, and we're looking at breaking those up into subcategories using our mixed-use zoning. And the consultant, Lisa Wise Consulting out of the Central Coast of California, we are drafting some form-based language for these sites, including the opportunity site. And just like Marco said, our goal is to look at density, not be as focused on use, and talk about pulling the buildings to the street front to make for more of a kind of an aesthetic, more of an urban aesthetic along that corridor. So we're continuing to work on that, and we're looking forward to rolling that out with our overall code update. And hearing what Marco's working on it's exciting, and we're hoping that we have some of the same success.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions or comments of Michelle? And thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Marco. Appreciate the update. If not, then we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Ray?
Thank you, Chair March. Ray Lathrop for the record again. The next item is to receive an update on the implementation activity of the regional plan through 2020. For this item, I'll be sharing highlights and a summary of the implementation progress report that was included in your agenda as backup to this item. I'll review how this year's report differs from previous progress reports and how we compiled it and some ideas we have moving forward. The report is rather lengthy, so hopefully I can keep this pretty short and high level. As a reminder, we've defined our role as core administrator of the regional plan to include these tasks here. These are now adopted on the current work program, and we've been providing updates on these tasks over this past year. This list really comes from the SNS implementation strategies that are assigned to the SNS team or to the RTC as the administrator of the regional plan. And today we'll talk about indicator tracking and annual report overall. So first, I want to remind everyone that we have been continuing to track and update 26 indicators on the metrics page of sns.rtcsnv.com. We've recently updated these indicators with available 2019 data, or we're in progress of updating these pages right now. Some of the pages are also going to be reconfigured to better fit with the hosting platform. So we hope you'll check these out and use them in your work going forward. Our commitment as a team, we've been providing detail and narrative on each of these data pages to really illustrate how this data is relevant to our local context so that everyone can understand what the data means, where it comes from, and how to apply it to either programs or policies. And second, this is a graphic which we've shared in the past of how we've tracked progress on strategies. Previously, we've met with key partners every year and then rated the strategies as a means to kind of illustrate activity on the plan. While this approach has not been as quantitative or objective as we'd like, it did provide us a little insight of a rough estimate as to how progress was moving forward. So the past 3 years, we've worked on this process and created this graphic. But there's big limitations to this type of qualitative review, especially because the majority of what we've known has come from interviews or the people we've worked closely with. And if we're not really familiar with the activities contributing to strategies, this may not be as accurate as possible, since this is really informed by our team's ability to stay aware. So this year we changed our process, and I believe we have a little better of an accurate and inclusive understanding of progress on the regional plan. We've talked about this year in July, or last year in July and October steering committee, as we framed kind of two very important factors that coincided over the last year. One being that the regional plan was adopted about 5 years ago, and most of our partners have been actively working on it over that course of time. But then second, many of you have been on the front lines of emergency response for the pandemic or faced drastic impacts because of the public health crisis. And so we really wanted to look at how much of this plan is still kind of prioritized and moving forward. So over the course of the fall, we met with each of the steering committee members like we've done every year. We asked about your priorities or issues that were emerging within your purview. And then we sent out a survey, pretty complicated spreadsheet to follow back up on those interviews with everybody. And we're very grateful and appreciative for everyone's time contributing to this report. So just really quickly, I shared at our last October meeting to recap what we kind of heard from our partner interviews. We heard about regional affordable housing or housing shortages or changes or questions about housing in the future. We heard a lot about sustainability, environmental sustainability, and the impacts of heat. We also heard about transportation and access and how maybe transit investment can be a catalyst to some of the new development types that our jurisdictions are interested in expanding. We also heard about a need and an interest in regional collaboration as we all continue forward. So the survey survey that we sent out really looked at this framework. What is really a priority, and what will it take to achieve everyone's SNS related outcomes? We organized the survey around the plan's objectives to broaden input across all the stakeholders and to reduce the amount of information that we requested. So this year's assessment looks very different than previous versions. The spreadsheet included very specific definitions around all of these terms so that they could be a little bit more standardized, and I'll look at some of the results in the coming slides. So overall, the survey identified almost the entire plan as having moderate or significant progress over the past 5 years. To determine this conclusion, we actually assigned a numerical value for each of the categories and then kind of tried to do some averaging around those. Almost 1/4 of the plan has been rated as significant progress, and the rest is mostly moderate. And this is really amazing. So it may not only point to the alignment across the region, but also about the shared vision and goals of the regional plan being continually relevant as our community continues to grow and mature. A contributing factor we definitely observe as to why the plan seems to be moving is the adoption of new local and master plans that really reflect the Southern Nevada Strong goals. So, of course, the City of Henderson was the first to adopt a conforming plan, Henderson Strong, in 2017. And since then, the City of Las Vegas and Clark County have begun rewriting their comprehensive plans that will also align with the overall regional vision. The full list of objectives that were rated as high overall progress can be found in the report. I won't have the time to read the entire list, but I wanted to point out a few kind of high-level observations. Most objectives that were rated as significant implementation progress included participation, if not leadership, from a regional entity that either convenes or coordinates or facilitates activities on that topic. These span major issue areas that are more relevant in nature to the region, so the economy or the environment or health. And that's an important note as we look at future regional planning or regional plans and how we can implement them together. And then second, following the public engagement and outreach example set by the planning team from the SNS plan, it's apparent that the local governments and our community partners have continued to invest in outreach and engage residents throughout implementation of the plan. Several objectives rated as high progress are the outcome of local governments focusing on neighborhood level interventions and broad inclusion of residents to provide input. So Henderson Strong is a great example. City of Las Vegas Vision 2045 and the master plan, the RTC's transit-oriented development cities, North Las Vegas Deer Springs District, as well as opportunity sites that kind of really look into the resident and the public and private perspective on moving forward. Third, Southern Nevada is definitely growing and maturing and has aging infrastructure, buildings, and communities that require new investment and tools. Following the Great Recession, agencies and community organizations had to prioritize recovery and shift focus internally to evaluate efficiencies, invest in partnerships, and examine return on investment. The progress related to these objectives that include redevelopment, infill development, transit-oriented development, and other benefits on the investment of compact communities is a sign that Southern Nevada community is maturing into a complex and increasingly urban environment. So for decades, Southern Nevada has had new projects, new homes, new residents. And while that still holds true, I think we've seen the local government really trying to prioritize the care and investment needed for our older corners of the community. And the success in these objectives is possibly just the evolution of what was needed over the past 5 years. And again, like we've heard in the opportunity sites strategy and in our housing update, while we may not have physical examples, we know that all of the local governments are significantly planning for new types of communities. Very few objectives were rated as less than, important, or I guess the term was nominal progress. Really only 3 objectives were rated this way. And it's possible that some of that could just be a combination of challenges around who's responsible, or other things taking precedent and priority, or a lack of community involvement or support. And so as we use this report going forward, we'll definitely pay attention to what those challenges and barriers might have been for some of the objectives and the progress over the last 5 years. Next slide is a pie chart noting the timeline of priorities over the next 12 to 18 months. Partners have rated each objective as far as the timeline associated with their own prioritization. Of all the objectives, over 80% of them are rated on average as either actively working on it or working on it in the next 6 months. Only 8 of the 58 objectives that were identified as working on after 12 months from now. So this may also reinforce that the entirety of the plan on average is relevant and important to the region. There were 21 objectives that were rated as high everything, mostly spread across increasing complete communities, improving economic competitiveness and education, and building capacity. Again, this list echoes the findings from the overall status. The objectives might have regional impact, a regional leader, or a result of ongoing maturity and growth in our community. For these objectives, it might be very clear that the partners and all of our community stakeholders are capable of working on these without support and are already engaged in partnerships that lend to supportive and successful collaboration. Looking at the 2021 priorities that were identified as not having the highest of progress over the last 5 years, those might be objectives where the regional planning team can help provide research or technical assistance projects. So in the report, we've listed objectives that were high priority, but not high progress. And then we've also listed objectives that are actively being worked on, but not high progress over the last 5 years. So these objectives, while I didn't include all of them here, are also very similar to what we heard in our interviews with our stakeholders. It echoes housing, environmental sustainability, transit and transportation investment, and regional collaboration. It's very apparent that the region is still building on the innovative work of the Southern Nevada Strong Regional Plan by continuing to work on improving the built environment to increase access for all residents to vital services and to improve quality of life, while also working on developing tools to incentivize or catalyze development that may be different than the existing suburban communities. The team is committed to consulting with regional partners to look at what actions are being taken, what influences have made this a priority, who's responsible, what are barriers, and if there's a regional entity that can facilitate or lead this work, or where collaboration may be efficient and beneficial. So upon review of objectives, what we've got now in this report is a list of places for our team to really look at where we can lend support and help evaluate our technical assistance. And we look forward to kind of talking with everybody after this about what we can be doing next. Upon review of the rest of the objectives, actually none were rated as unknown or honor and let go. No objectives were rated as a current priority, but having an unknown timeline. So it was really good response to know that people are really still working on the implementation of the regional plan. And there was very little contradiction across all of the partners that we received responses for. Only 5 objectives were rated as kind of different among some partners or maybe unknown, and we should research some more. And so we're going to really dig into evaluating those objectives to figure out their current status. And so as we look ahead, we're definitely want to use this report as a active document where we can reference back to it as we evaluate what our team is doing to support implementation and support your activities. We'll definitely want to pull some conversations, maybe even some one-on-ones follow up as we continue to refine what is next year's work program. And then where can we maybe put some partners together and look at where regional collaboration might be efficient for everybody. Our intention, like I said, is to keep this report really as a reference to just help us understand implementation of the regional plan better. So I know that was a really quick overview. The document itself is rather lengthy, but I didn't want to get into too much detail. I welcome any of your input on the report itself or how we might be able to use some of this analysis together as we move forward. If you have any thoughts or questions, we are open. And in the next, I guess, month or so, we'll be defining some additional research for the next year's Unified Planning Work Program. And if anyone has any thoughts that can come out of this report or any other things, we're really open to your input. So with that.
Thank you, Ray. Are there any questions or comments for Ray from the committee members? Ray, where do people find this report?
It was included in the backup of your agenda. And we can email it out and share it to anyone who would like another copy of it. And it's similar, like your own copy.
And is it on the RTC website or the SNS website?
It is not yet, but we could include it on, once it's final, after we get any responses or feedback or comments, later on the current planning projects. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Again, Ray Lathrop. This item is to discuss any current work activities or priorities related to implementation of the regional plan. We've traditionally held this item open for anyone to report in on some announcements or details about any of their own work going forward.
Members, anyone want to update on some of the things they're working on and their priorities and things that they're focusing on in the coming year? Come on, you guys, you're doing something out there. I know you are. School's going back, maybe?
Mayor March, this is Zane Marshall with the Southern Nevada Water Authority.
Yes, Zane.
So I can report that the Southern Nevada Water Authority board has adopted recommendations from our Integrated Resource Planning Advisory Committee towards the end of last year and have recently completed a strategic plan that we're beginning the implementation of, focused on our water smart landscaping programs, water efficient technologies, and coordination with community members to push water conservation in the community further through the next few years. We anticipate going into shortage conditions in 2022, given the most recent Bureau of Reclamation 24-month study. So we have sufficient resources to meet the community's needs, even in the shortage conditions, but this just highlights the need for continued conservation in the community.
Thank you, Zane.
You're welcome.
Marco?
Yes, Mayor March, Marco Vallada for the record. Just a note that the City of Las Vegas 2050 Master Plan will be on the April 15th Planning Commission agenda and the May 19th City Council agenda as part of our adoption process. We'll have neighborhood meetings on the 3rd and 4th weeks of March at virtually and socially distanced at City Hall. A few community centers in Las Vegas. So that'd be March 16th, 18th, 22nd, and 24th for all 6 wards of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other updates, things that are going on in communities or in the private sector? Maybe, I don't know if LVGEA is still on, what they're doing.
Hey, Mayor March, this is Chad Williams with the Housing Authority.
Hi, Chad.
Hey, so I have 2 updates for everyone. The first one is on March 8th, our Section 8 waiting list will be opening. It hasn't opened in 12 years here in the Valley. It'll be open to 5,000 applicants, first come, first serve. But we're going to uniquely select individuals through a lottery system. So those 5,000 individuals, regardless of what time they apply for our Section 8 program, they will be picked as vouchers become open over the next 2 years through a lottery system. That's number one. And then number two, on March 1st, we will be establishing a landlord incentive program, particularly for small property owners, landlords, single family individuals. We will be offering up to $350 to accept a Section 8 landlord tenant. If you're a new participant landlord in the program, and if you are already an existing participant, we'll be offering up to close to $200. And we currently have a fund set aside of about $600,000 for that program. And so the money will be available until it runs out.
Wonderful progress. That's great news, Chad. Thank you. Anyone else with comments that they wish to share?
I'll jump in. This is Andrew Rother with the City of Henderson. Just in furthering the efforts for affordable housing, we got some really good news from the BLM, and 3 of the sites that we're working on to identify as being reserved for affordable housing through the SNPMA process, we just formally got approval just today from the BLM that they've accepted our reservations, and we'll continue to work with them on finding partners to develop these sites. But this is a first big step that we haven't taken before, and I think it's directly in line with some of the efforts in the Southern Nevada Strong Regional Plan.
Thank you, Andrew. Anyone else? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Ray?
All right. Thank you, Chair March. This item is to discuss future agenda items. Staff seeks guidance from the SNS Steering Committee on future agenda items to keep meetings of the committee engaging and informational, and would like direction on future agenda items that would further advance implementation of the regional plan.
Members, any ideas, any suggestions, things you want to add? Maybe we should look at putting housing and jobs housing back on going forward, then also the heat vulnerability update. So as we're working on an active project, that maybe there's input from the members in that process.
Absolutely.
This is Bob Field, and I'd like to add that we've been at Rafi, we've been assisting the county in developing the new sports and entertainment district surrounding the Raider Stadium. And I think probably by the time we have our next gathering, Nancy Amundsen can probably provide us, the committee, with a report on the progress that has taken place there and how she's going about wrapping up that planning process.
That's a great suggestion, Bob. Thank you. Any other suggestions from our members? How about we maybe even have LVGEA give us an update on some of the businesses they're bringing into town and what the priorities are to diversify our economy so that we're not just dependent on certain primary industries. Anyone else?
This is Nicole from the Southern Nevada Health District. I was just wondering about, is there any relevant legislation that people are tracking through the session that would be worth updating the members about?
That's an excellent suggestion. There'll probably be some things to report out by the time we have our next meeting. Let's make sure we add that to it. And perhaps we should talk about where we're at in terms of COVID and vaccine.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions, suggestions, things we want to add? That's probably a lot, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll track some of that down and see if we can get some presentations for April.
Okay. Thank you. Then the next item, unless there's someone else that, okay, the next item is to conduct the public comment period, right?
Yeah. Item number 9 is our final citizens participation. This is the second time set aside for public comment. Marion, do we have any from the public?
Thank you. This is Maren Dubois, Management Analyst for the RTC for the record. We do not have any public comments at this time.
Well, okay. Well, thank you all for attending this meeting. I know it's more challenging being virtual, but I think we've discussed and heard a lot today. And I don't know if there's any board member comments or committee member comments, but I'm grateful that you all still show up and virtually join us and are part of the discussion and conversation and how we continue to move forward. And if there's no additional comments, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. This meeting's